Hello, thank you for joining me in this writing skill video. Today we're going to look at commas, this time specifically non-essential elements within a sentence and how to use commas in that case. Essentially, non-essential elements are adding extra information into your sentence, and there's a way that you should punctuate that. So let's take a look at that. So what is a non-essential phrase? I have a picture here of some decorations because it is almost like decoration within a sentence. It's not part of the main sentence. It's extra information that's been inserted into the sentence that's not absolutely required to define the element preceding it. So if it were an essential element or an essential phrase, it would be necessary to truly understand the sentence. Non-essential phrases are not. They are extra information, helpful information perhaps, but not essential to the meaning of your sentence. So unlike essential phrases, they should be placed within commas. Okay, so when you insert these phrases into your sentence, you need to remember to put the commas around that. Okay, so here are some examples of non-essential phrases. So in the painting, George Washington, comma, the first president of the United States, comma, stands triumphantly in the boat. So the first president of the United States is just extra information added into the sentence. Helpful information, but it's not required for the main meaning of the sentence, which is describing George Washington standing triumphantly in the boat. We already know George Washington is the first president, so it's just extra information to add that in. Okay, so therefore you need commas around it. So here's another example. All students, comma, regardless of grade point average, comma, are encouraged to apply for the scholarship. Okay, so the regardless of grade point average isn't necessary to define what students you're talking about or anything like that. It's just extra information that helps clarify this information about the scholarship. But the main information is all students are encouraged to apply, right? And the regardless of grade point average is stuck in the sentence. So when that happens in your sentence, you need to put the commas around it. Here's another example. My favorite visionary is Walt Disney, comma, who revolutionized animation and the entire theme park industry. So the real sentence is about the favorite visionary, but the author of this sentence added more information about Walt Disney. Not to define who Walt Disney is, but just to add some interesting information into the sentence, okay? And help emphasize what this person personally thinks is important. So it very often happens with these who phrases. So watch out for those sentences, although they can, in some situations, be essential elements too. So you have to determine whether it's essential to the meaning or not, okay? And here's another one. I was born in 2001, which was the year that the 9/11 attacks occurred. So the main information of the sentence is when they were born, in 2001, right? But extra information has been added about the year 2001. That's not what the sentence overall is about, but it's just adding that extra information. So which was the year that 9/11 attacks occurred? By the way, usually which phrases are non-essential. However, people do misuse which and that sometimes, but usually if you're using which and that correctly, which is non-essential and you need that comma, okay? If it's a that phrase, then it's necessary to define the previous element, which is not for 2001 in this sentence. So this is a non-essential phrase, okay? And here's another example. Sometimes it can be just a word stuck in. So Stephen King's wife, Tabitha, rescued his first published novel, Carrie, from the trash can. So in both cases, naming is extraneous. Stephen King's wife is Tabitha, okay? He wasn't remarried or anything. So Stephen King's wife and Tabitha are actually synonymous. You don't need to have the name to understand the sentence, but it's given as extra information. It's stuck in, so you can go ahead and put commas around it. And the same is true for the first published novel. Carrie is his first published novel. Nothing will ever change about that. So if I say Stephen King's first published novel, it's always Carrie. So actually naming it is extraneous in this case. It's non-essential. So you need the commas around that. If you were trying to define which of many novels, you would have to say Carrie, okay? But that's not the case here. There's only one first published novel, okay? So when it's extra information, you put commas around it. So I also wanted to give some examples of phrases that are essential so you can separate those in your mind, because these you don't need the comma, okay? So if they're essential, then we don't put the commas around it. So notice in this case, anyone who guesses the correct number of jelly beans wins $100. So that's a who phrase that's needed to define anyone. Because if you just say anyone wins $100, that's not conveying the information of the sentence correctly, right? You have to define what anyone, right? It's the ones who guess, anyone who guesses the correct number of jelly beans. So you have to have that defining element. And that's the difference. If you lost that phrase, the whole meaning of the sentence doesn't really make sense anymore, okay? Because it's not about anyone wins $100 for anything. It's the ones who win who guess correctly. Those are the people who win. So it's necessary for the meaning of the sentence. And here's another example. You can come by and look at the tools that I will be selling in the garage sale tomorrow, okay? So here's an example of that versus which is non-essential. That, if used correctly, is essential. So if you had just said, you can come by and look at the tools, it doesn't define which tools you're talking about. Any tools that he has in his house? Probably not, right? It's the ones he's selling in the garage sale that are being talked about here. So you need that phrase, that I will be selling in the garage sale tomorrow, right? And then this one, the concert that will feature classic bands from the 1970s is the only one that interests me. So notice that that phrase, that will feature classic bands from the 1970s, that's absolutely needed. It's essential to determine which concerts are being talked about here. If you just said the concert is the only one that interests me, what concert, right? You have to have that defining element. And clearly the group of concerts is being narrowed down just to the specific kind of concert. So you don't put commas around it in that case. And here's the same example with the novel Carrie. So Stephen King, as you know, has written many novels. So this sentence is a completely different case than before, where Carrie was the first published novel. But in this case, it's defining which among many different ones. So you don't put commas in this case. So Stephen King's novel Carrie, so Carrie is needed to define which novel you're talking about, because he's written dozens of them, right? Is my favorite, okay? So in this case, you don't want the commas around Carrie because it is essential to the meaning of the sentence. Okay, so I know that can be a confusing situation. You have to, though, figure out what is needed for that sentence. Okay, so it's just a matter of practicing it. You can get more information about that and commas in general in section 9, chapter 43 of the Rough Rider's Guide. And you can also ask a Yavapai College Learning Center tutor to work with you directly on that particular issue if you're having a hard time figuring that out in your papers. Also, you can, of course, contact your instructor by email, or you can stop by their office hours and work directly on this issue with them. Okay, so thank you so much for attending, and I'll see you in the next Writing Skills video.